you really hate Sean Combs.
Why would they be thinking that?
Because of the things that you post on Instagram, because of the...
Look at this. And let's stop for a second and do say that I hated him enough to hire his kids. And we've never done anything to each other. So it's just competitive energy and things that you say about other artists while you're in hip. Because there's a point where it kind of gets aggressive. He says, you're going to find out, like how I'll handle this. And that's... An attorney want to be combative with another attorney. That's not like your publicist would say those things.
But one time walking in the studio and it was like a small gap and bleak beans. Everybody was in there and I was like, man, I'm telling you, man, y'all got a chance right now. Just flood it. Put out a lot of music because
Hollywood hates one thing more than bad press: unpredictability. And the moment 50 Cent decided to call out the industry instead of playing along with it, the entire room went stiff, like someone just flipped the lights on during a secret meeting. No long rent, no press conference. Just a few pointed words that landed like a smoke grenade and refused to clear. Because when 50 speaks, he doesn't gossip, he provokes. He doesn't accuse, he suggests. And suggestion is far more dangerous in an industry built on silence, alliances, and unspoken rules. This wasn't a diss track. This was a reminder that Hollywood's walls are thinner than they pretend. Than the names started. Circling. Not random names, not small names. Diddy, Beyoncé. Two figures usually protected by layers of influence, loyalty, and image control. And suddenly, they weren't being accused, they were being discussed, questioned, pulled into the conversation whether they liked it or not. The internet froze, rewound, and leaned in, because this didn't feel like trolling. It felt like pressure, the kind that makes publicists sweat, phones buzz, and silence get very loud. And tonight, we're breaking down how one move by 50 Cent cracked open Hollywood's comfort zone, why Diddy and Beyoncé ended up in the drama, and what this moment reveals about an industry that only panics when people start asking the wrong questions. The moment 50 Cent called out Hollywood, it didn't land like gossip. It landed like someone yanking a tablecloth while everyone was still pretending dinner was normal. No names shouted from rooftops, no dramatic press run. Just enough pressure to make the room uncomfortable. And in Hollywood, discomfort is a bigger threat than accusations, because this wasn't 50 ranting for attention. This was 50 reminding the industry that he knows how the machine works. And more importantly, where it breaks, he didn't accuse Hollywood of one thing. He accused it of being Hollywood, of running on silence, selective outrage, and backroom loyalty dressed up as business. And once that door cracked open, the internet didn't need instructions. It rushed in like it had been waiting for permission. The first reaction wasn't chaos, it was stiffness. Celebrities posting unrelated content. Public figures suddenly very focused on positivity. Industry insiders choosing their words like every sentence had to survive discovery. That's when you know something landed too close to the bone. Then the names started circling, not because 50 dragged them directly, but because implication has gravity. Diddy's name didn't enter the conversation like a headline. It drifted in like a shadow that's been following the industry for years. Whenever discussions turn to power, influence, and longevity without accountability, certain figures become unavoidable. Not guilty by accusation, heavy by history. And then Beyoncé's name appeared near the conversation. And the entire energy shifted, because Beyoncé isn't just famous. She's protected by perception. She exists in a category where criticism usually bounces off without leaving a mark. So when her name even brushed against Hollywood drama, it didn't spark outrage, it sparked unease. Fans didn't fight. They questioned. And questioning is where icons start losing insulation. What made this moment volatile wasn't what was said. It was how fast everyone understood what might be meant without it being spelled out. Hollywood runs on implication as much as contracts, and 50 knows that better than most. Social media immediately went into archive mode. Old interviews resurfaced. Industry relationships were re-examined. Photos, award show moments, business, ties. Everything suddenly felt relevant. Not because it proved anything, but because implication doesn't need proof to spread. And 50 stayed quiet. That silence was not accidental. It was strategy. He understands that clarification calms people down, but silence lets anxiety bloom. Every hour without explanation gave the internet more room to speculate and Hollywood more reason to sweat. Memes followed, but they weren't lighthearted. They were nervous jokes. People comparing 50 to the guy who drops one line in a group chat and then disappears. Others saying this felt like the opening scene of a documentary nobody wants released, but everyone would secretly watch. Humor, yes, but humor masking tension. The industry response told the real story. No loud denials. No aggressive clapbacks. Just recalibration, panels avoiding certain topics. Interviews steering away from industry politics. Publicists choosing safety over confidence. That's not how an industry reacts when something is harmless. That's how it reacts when it's unsure how much the other person knows. And that uncertainty is dangerous. Diddy's presence in the conversation grew heavier, not because of new information, but because of accumulation. Past whispers, old power. Dynamics and long-standing silence suddenly felt louder when placed under this new light. 50 didn't introduce anything new. He reminded people of what never went away. Beyonce's position was different, and that difference mattered. She wasn't accused. She wasn't confronted. She was pulled into the discussion by proximity, and proximity alone was enough to make people uncomfortable. Icons don't collapse when questioned, but they do recalibrate. And recalibration changes how power moves. Hollywood thrives on the illusion that certain figures exist above the mess. This moment cracked that illusion just enough to be noticed. Not shattered, not destroyed. Just questioned. The public reaction split quickly. Some dismissed it as 50 being 50, trolling, stirring the pot, enjoying chaos. Others sensed something colder beneath it. Because trolling usually comes with a punchline. This didn't. This felt like pressure without release. Comment sections turned into debates about accountability versus proof. Some demanded receipts. Others argued that demanding receipts is exactly how powerful systems protect themselves, by keeping truth locked behind NDAs, fear, and time. The argument wasn't about facts anymore. It was about trust, and Hollywood does not like trust. Being questioned, every hour the conversation lingered without resolution made it stronger. Not louder, stronger. It stopped being a moment and became a mood, the kind that sticks to unrelated headlines. The kind that makes people read between lines they used to skim past. The most unsettling part was how normal everything looked. On the surface, awards still happened. Releases still dropped. Smiles still flashed on red carpets. But underneath, the industry felt watched in a way it hates. Not by cameras, by curiosity. Because once the audience starts listening for what isn't being said, silence stops working the way it used to. This wasn't exposure. It was permission. Permission for people to wonder out loud. Permission to connect dots without apologizing. Permission to question why some stories never reach daylight while others get burned alive instantly. And that permission doesn't get revoked easily. By the end of the day, nothing had been proven. Nothing had been confirmed, but something had shifted. Hollywood didn't look different. It moved differently. More careful, more guarded, more aware that the audience wasn't just consuming stories anymore. Once the conversation escaped the celebrity blogs and hit mainstream timelines, Hollywood's posture changed again. Not defensive, not apologetic, strategic. That's the phase where people stop reacting and start coordinating. Because when implication spreads without an anchor, the safest move isn't denial, it's alignment. Suddenly, everyone sounded the same. INFL, UENCERS started posting vague captions about truth, accountability, and the industry. Changing. No names, no specifics. Just enough moral fog to trend without liability. It was the social media equivalent of lighting a candle and pretending you're not standing in smoke. The timing wasn't accidental. It never is. Meanwhile, the memes went from jokes to warnings. People compared the moment to an earthquake where no buildings collapsed, but everyone felt the shake. Others said it felt like watching a magician freeze mid-trick because someone in the audience asked the wrong question. Hollywood loves control, and nothing rattles it faster than curiosity it can't redirect. 50 Cent still didn't say a word, That silence became its own headline. Reaction channels dissected his non-response. Like it was coded language. If this was nothing, he'd laugh it off. If he was bluffing, he'd overplay it. If he was wrong, he'd walk it back. Instead, he let the internet argue for him. That's how you know someone is comfortable. Letting pressure build. And pressure was building fast. Diddy's name kept surfacing in conversations about gatekeeping and influence. Not because anyone produced new allegations, but because he represents longevity in a system that rarely lets go of power voluntarily. People weren't accusing. They were reassessing. And reassessment is far more dangerous than outrage. Outrage burns out. Reassessment sticks. Beyonce's situation pulled a different kind of attention. Her fan base didn't explode. It mobilized quietly. Deflection through excellence. Elevate the art. Spotlight the legacy. Shift the narrative upward. It's a proven strategy, and usually it works. But this time, the conversation didn't disappear. It just lowered its voice. When people stop yelling and start whispering, that's when things get serious. Pop culture commentators started framing the moment as a Hollywood stress test. Not a scandal, not a cancellation, but a check on how the industry handles discomfort without a villain to sacrifice. No one was being dragged publicly, and that made the situation harder to resolve. Hollywood knows how to handle scandals. It doesn't know how to handle suspicion. Suspicion doesn't need proof to survive. It only needs repetition, and repetition was everywhere. Comment sections started connecting unrelated stories back to the same question. Is this what 50 meant? That's when a moment stops being isolated and becomes structural. The audience noticed the pattern of silence. Who spoke quickly? Who stayed quiet? Who suddenly avoided interviews? Who pivoted topics? Silence stopped looking neutral and started looking coordinated. In an industry built on narratives, coordinated silence reads like choreography. And people hate choreography when they didn't buy tickets. The jokes turned darker. Memes compared Hollywood to a house with expensive furniture and weak foundations. Others joked that 50 didn't expose secrets. He exposed anxiety. And anxiety is contagious. Once one person starts acting cautious, everyone else adjusts. The pressure wasn't coming from headlines. It was coming from hesitation. Projects didn't get canceled, they slowed. Announcements didn't stop, they got vague. Panels didn't get scrapped, they got sanitized. That's how industries protect themselves when they can't predict the weather, and the audience felt it. Fans began questioning why Hollywood always reacts this way. Why uncomfortable conversations get redirected instead of addressed. Why accountability feels optional once influence reaches a certain altitude. These weren't 50's questions, but he opened the door for them. That's when the argument split hard. One side demanded receipts. If you're going to call out Hollywood, say what you mean. The other side pushed back, saying that demanding receipts ignores how power actually operates behind NDAs, settlements, and careers that can vanish overnight. The debate wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about access. Who gets to speak freely? Who pays the price for doing it? And who benefits from silence? Hollywood doesn't like those questions because there are no flattering answers. The longer the conversation dragged on, the more it felt unfinished. No climax, no villain reveal. Just a sustained sense that something wasn't being said on purpose. And unfinished stories don't fade. They embed. By now, the narrative wasn't 50 Cent called out Hollywood. It was Hollywood doesn't want to respond. That's a very different headline, because calling someone out invites debate. Refusing to engage invites suspicion. And suspicion doesn't care how many awards you've won, or how clean your image looks. It just waits. The most unsettling development was how normal everything appeared publicly. Red carpets still glittered, smiles still flashed. Applause still rang, but behind the scenes, conversations changed. People listened more, spoke less, measured reactions like currency. After the noise settled into a low, constant hum, the real shift began, not on timelines, not in headlines, in behavior. Hollywood didn't panic, it recalibrated. That's how you know a moment mattered. When an industry built on spectacle chooses subtlety, It's because something touched a nerve it can't publicly address. The most noticeable change wasn't who spoke. It was who didn't. Invitations got more selective. Panels avoided industry politics. Interviews stuck to safe lanes. People smiled, nodded, and pivoted like seasoned diplomats. This wasn't censorship. It was self-preservation. Hollywood doesn't exile people loudly unless it has to. It waits. It measures. It lets time sand down sharp edges while everyone pretends nothing changed. But things changed. Diddy's name didn't vanish from the conversation. It stabilized there. Not as a headline villain, not as an exposed figure, but as a reference point. The kind that lingers whenever power, longevity, and influence come up in the same sentence. No accusations needed. The gravity did the work. And gravity doesn't care about intent. The consequence wasn't collapse. It was compression. Options narrowed. Optics mattered more. Associations became intentional instead of casual. When scrutiny increases, flexibility decreases. That's not punishment.
It's
Pressure. And pressure alters trajectories quietly. Long before anyone admits it, Beyoncé's orbit responded differently, and that difference mattered. There was no scramble, no public defensiveness. Just elevation, more art, more excellence, more reminders. OF mastery. It's a proven play. Raise the ceiling so the questions feel small by comparison. Usually it works. This time it worked differently. The questions didn't disappear. They softened. They lowered their volume. They moved into side conversations and comment threads where tone matters less than curiosity. That's more dangerous than outrage. Outrage burns hot and dies fast. Curiosity embeds. It waits. It resurfaces when the next unrelated headline drops. Hollywood hates embedded questions. Because embedded questions don't need answers to persist. They just need moments to attach themselves to. And now every unrelated industry story felt like a possible footnote. Is this connected? Is this what he meant? Why does this feel familiar? That's how a moment becomes a lens. And lenses change how people see everything. 50 Cent never followed up. No clarification, no escalation, no denial. That restraint did more damage than any rant could have. Because if he had said more, the conversation would have narrowed. By saying nothing, he let it widen. The silence functioned like a mirror. People saw what they expected to see. Some saw trolling. Some saw warning. Some saw a test. Hollywood couldn't agree on which one it was. And that disagreement is costly. When institutions can't align on interpretation, they default to caution. Caution slows movement. Slow movement costs money. Money hates uncertainty. And uncertainty was everywhere. The audience noticed the micro-signals. Timing shifts. Topic avoidance. Language smoothing. Silence became data. Delay became evidence. Neutrality felt like choreography. In a culture trained to read subtext, these signals spoke louder than statements ever could. The most uncomfortable truth is this: nothing had to be true for consequences to be real. Perception reshapes behavior long before facts arrive. And in Hollywood, behavior is currency. Who you stand next to. What you say publicly. What you don't say at all. That currency started trading at a different rate. This wasn't a reckoning. It was a stress test. And stress tests don't end with fireworks. They end with reports. Quiet conclusions about what holds under pressure and what needs reinforcement. The industry learned that implication alone can bend the room. That the audience doesn't need proof to ask better questions. That silence isn't the shield it used to be. The longer this sat unresolved, the more it normalized doubt. Not cynicism, doubt. Doubt is subtle. It doesn't cancel. It doesn't trend. It erodes confidence a fraction at a time. And eroded confidence makes institutions lean harder on optics than substance. Optics can be managed. Confidence can't be faked forever. That's why this moment mattered beyond the names involved. It signaled a shift in how power is perceived. The audience stopped asking who's right and started asking who decides what we're allowed to know. That's a structural question, not a celebrity one. And structural questions don't go away when the timeline refreshes. Hollywood attempted to move on. New releases, new announcements, New applause cues, but the background noise stayed. Not loud enough to derail anything. Loud enough to be felt. Like a low frequency you can't unhear once you notice it. The long memory kicked in. This moment became shorthand. A reference. A pause people point to when conversations about accountability stall. Remember when 50 said, "Isn't an accusation, it's a reminder." Reminders are powerful because they don't demand belief. They invite consideration. And consideration changes rooms. Diddy's legacy didn't implode. It tightened. Beyonce's aura didn't dim. It narrowed the margin for ambiguity. Hollywood's confidence didn't shatter. It thinned. These are not dramatic outcomes. They are durable ones. Because durable changes don't announce themselves. They accumulate. The most telling sign of fallout wasn't who lost opportunities. It was who became careful. Careful language. Careful alliances. Careful timing. Carefulness is expensive in an industry built on momentum. And when momentum slows, new players notice openings. If you made it this far, you already felt it. This wasn't about one post, one name, or one moment. This was about pressure. The kind that doesn't explode on contact but makes powerful rooms start moving differently. And when Hollywood moves differently, there's always a reason. Now I want to hear your take. Was 50 Cent just stirring the pot like he's done 100 times before, or did he expose something deeper about how the industry protects itself when the wrong questions start circulating? Do you think this was harmless trolling, or a calculated reminder that silence only works when people agree to stop listening? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back. Because the real conversation never happens in press releases. And don't tap the like button gently. Smash that like button like it owes you money. Because every click tells the algorithm you want uncomfortable breakdowns, not polished fairy tales and industry-approved narratives. If you're tired of celebrity silence being treated like innocence, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications too, because stories like this don't end, they echo. They resurface in pauses and side eyes and in moments when answers don't match the question. And when the next breadcrumb drops, you'll already know where the real analysis lives. This channel doesn't chase drama. We follow patterns. We don't scream accusations. We listen to what isn't being said.